I've lived a pretty screwed up life so far. In my short 16 years, I've lived in 5 countries on 5 continents, spanning over 6 schools, not counting the countries I visited. That's more travel than most of us do in our lifetime. To clarify, I'm not bragging. Not in any way. But living this sort of lifestyle has an effect on people. We'll get deeper into that later. The short version is this. I was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Lived there for 4 years, learning 3 different languages, including English, Spanish, and Norwegian. At the tender age of 5, we moved to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Being so young, the move wasn't the hardest on me, and before long, I had new friends that in my head would last a lifetime. 2 years later, we moved to North Carolina, located on the east coast of the US. Moving had been such a big part of my life, the move did not faze me as much as it should have. This is where I began to lay my roots, not thinking about my family's tendency to move on average every 4 years. But it did give me the chance to rekindle my relationship with my family that we would usually only see during the summer. Again, creating memories that would last a lifetime. We moved to Beijing, China 3 years later. I wasn't all sad, because I thought we would keep up our friendships that we had created over the past couple years. But over time, it began to fade away. China is where I would say I grew up. I guess I could call it home. That doesn't make much sense. But this is where my strongest friendships at the time were made, and where a foreign culture for the first time had become a part of who I was. Moving to Norway was by far the hardest move, as there was no part of me that wanted to move here. We had visited it every summer, and I'm legally from here, but I didn't want to move home, since I would be leaving home. Although being accepted by the Norwegian community has been hard, moving to Norway has grown on me. A little. I am what you call a TCK, otherwise known as a third culture kid, as are the vast majority of international school students. The term was coined by sociologist Ruth Hill in the 1950s for children who spend their formative years in places that are not in their parents' homeland. Since its conception, the term third culture kids has been tossed around, today having several different meanings.
A third culture kid is a kid
that identifies with 3 cultures,
who's growing up in a culture that's not his own and living in a culture that's not his own.
Their home culture, their host culture, and third culture.
With parents who are not part of the culture, living and existing and growing up in a very different way.
Kind of the culture of international living.
And probably returning sometimes to their original country with a very different set of life experiences.
In most international school communities, the term of TCK is common knowledge. Unlike the others, Skagerrak is a total student body of 400 kids. Most of them are either from or have lived in Norway for most of their lives. The understanding of TCKs are so crucial because most of us are a part of or been affected by the TCK community. And in the process, we've created our own community and family. Over the course of my 16 years, I've been introduced to multiple languages, including English, Norwegian, Spanish, Chinese, and Amharic. I believe being introduced to all these different societies has caused me to become more of an open-minded person.
To be adaptable and able to handle situations that change.
It shaped the way that I view other people, my first interpretations of them.
You become more socially aware. You get to connect with a lot of people.
It's the absolute best way to bring up a child, if possible, to break down the barriers and the bubbles of regional thinking.
The positives far outweigh the negatives.
It exposes the child to experiences that most people never have access to.
Not only enriches your understanding of the world, but it helps you understand yourself better.
It's living and immersing yourself in a culture which is so foreign, but at the same time so fascinating.
It's really important to have an understanding of the world around us.
Even though living the third culture kid lifestyle causes you to leave every couple years, the new friends that you make usually last a lifetime. In the past, I've always had trouble with answering the question, so where do you come from? Or the question, so where do you call home?
Home.
I actually still don't know how to define my identity or what my identity is.
Home is really just wherever my family is, honestly.
Even after making a whole report about what it is, I still feel just as lost.
I don't have this particular setting in my mind that I think is home.
There's English, I'm not English enough.
Even though I've lived here for a long time, I haven't fully integrated, I think.
I feel more international.
But I do have aspects of the culture in me anyway.
Esteemed third culture kid author Ruth Van Recken writes that a TCK builds relationships to all experienced cultures, while not having full ownership in any. Although elements from each culture are assimilated into the TCK's life experience, the sense of belonging is in relationships to others of similar backgrounds. Since I legally obtained 3 nationalities and have lived all over the world, it's very hard for me to differentiate the cultures I was born with and the cultures I've picked up along the way, including the fact that every time I move from country to country, you have to start over and make new friends. And when the move came, it tore me apart. This is classified as nature versus nurture, and in some cases, the repeated losses caused by regular moves can trigger anxiety, depression, and stress among TCKs. It is especially hard for me to go back to places where I call home,
I feel connected, but I don't feel accepted.
as I should be. I find myself changing who I am depending on where I am to fit in. Sociologist Ruth Hill states, it does end up marking them as different when they return to their home countries, where most people won't be able to comprehend their way of life. But they will have to live with that. Their upbringing sets them up to be more flexible and better able to cope with change. No matter how much third culture kids endure, it seems that they want their children to have the same experiences they had in the next generations to come.
And I know there's one thing that I will never change. Even if I move back to my hometown in Canada tomorrow, my kids would go to a school like ours here at Skagerrak, as international as possible.
Language is like a big part in my identity, at least. Like, I feel like that's a very important part of culture.
Employers are really interested in people who are adaptable and diverse.
Being a very flexible person will help me become more successful in the future. I'm able to adapt to a lot of different situations, with a lot of different people.
And probably returning sometimes to their original country with a very different set of life experiences.
In conclusion, the positive effects of being a third culture kid far outweigh the negatives, and that living this sort of life can benefit not only your life, but the lives of your future generations to come.